Hello, my name is Shade Summerall, and my partner for this project is Kendall Phillips. Today, we are examining some of the ethical issues faced by physicians and hospitals regarding end-of-life care. This issue has been a hot topic of debate since the 1990s and continues to spark conflict. The main arguments for this issue revolve around the concept of palliative care versus physician-assisted death. With limited amounts of data on the efficacy of physician-assisted death due to its taboo nature, most conversations are dominated by questions about ethical considerations rather than quantitative analysis. End-of-life care for individuals who have suffered some fatal injury or are approaching the end of a battle with chronic disease has been a popular topic of debate within the medical community. The goals of current end-of-life care are to minimize suffering and pain while respecting a patient's wishes. Not all people experience pain near death, but for those who do, morphine and opiates are frequently utilized. Another important part of end-of-life care is the provision of counseling and support services for patients. Input from a therapist or psychologist can help a dying person know that their concerns are being heard. Controversy over assisted suicide took off in 1990 when pathologist Jack Kevorkian assisted one of his patients in ending her life. Nearly 10 years later, he was convicted of second-degree murder. But the seeds of this concept had already been planted. Kevorkian, nicknamed Dr. Death, assisted in over 100 suicides before he eventually overstepped his bounds in the media and lost popularity. Some valuable clinical developments did come from Kevorkian's reckless actions, though, when policy guidelines were implemented in Oregon stating that patients judged to have 6 months or less to live could legally participate in physician-assisted suicide. Under the Affordable Care Act, Medicare now covers treatment and stays in hospice facilities for chronically ill patients. This addition to services has helped to increase the availability of palliative care for some, but has not yet eliminated the number of elderly individuals ending up in the ICU. One issue with the current Medicare coverage for terminally ill patients is that the program does not cover both treatment and hospice services. Because of this, many patients are opting to refuse hospice care in favor of receiving ongoing treatment for their illness because they cannot afford both treatments. While some people are pushing to legalize physician-assisted death, the American College of Physicians, a major governing body in medical decision-making, has held strong with its stance against this protocol. The American College of Physicians instead promotes advancement in the availability of palliative care to patients. This group recognizes the issues with the current availability of palliative care and that it is frequently not covered by insurance or too expensive for families to afford.
While physician-assisted suicide is a huge part of a doctor's responsibility when talking about end-of-life care, another big issue is the artificial prolonging of life. Because of the vast amount of technology available today to prolong life, this technology can be extremely useful to save lives, but can also be tricky when a doctor or the patient's family must decide what to do in case someone must be put on life support and how long they should be on this life support for. Many of these individuals who are in tragic accidents often do not have a living will where they can decide what they would want if something were to happen to them. Many people think it's not necessary to have a living will, or they just don't want to think that something terrible might happen to them. It has shown that two characteristics describing those who already had a living will was that they were highly educated and they did not consider the living will form too long for its purpose. This shows that those who are uneducated about the laws regarding a living will and those who think the paperwork is just simply too long to do are the ones who are more likely to not have this living will. However, this document can mean everything when deciding what to do if a terrible accident were to occur. An example of a complication that can occur on a situational basis is that doctors have the right to remove a patient's feeding tube if they can no longer communicate their wishes. A terminally ill 44-year-old man named Leslie Burke wished to keep his life support and feeding tube if this situation were to arise. Mr. Burke objected to clauses that could permit doctors to withdraw artificial nutrition or hydration from a patient in cases where doctors judged that the patient's quality of life was very poor, even if a living will requested continued life support. He just believed he should have the right to choose his own life, even if he could not speak what he wanted for himself anymore. He won this case and was able to have peace of mind to know that if this situation arose, he would still be kept alive on a feeding tube and ventilator. On the other side of the coin, there are many cases of individuals who wish to have their feeding tubes or ventilators removed to die with peace and dignity under certain circumstances. But there have been issues with laws allowing these people to choose to die painlessly. An example of a very famous case about this involved a woman named Terry Schiavo. Terry collapsed at home and suffered a severe brain injury and was placed on life support with very little hope that she would wake up. After being in a coma for 2.5 months, her husband recommended removing her feeding tube. She did not have a living will, but her husband insisted she would not want to live artificially this way. While her parents did not want to remove her feeding tube and fought to keep her alive even in this persistent vegetative state. After an intense legal battle, having Terry's feeding tube removed and reinserted several times, the Palm Sunday Compromise passed, which allowed for physicians to remove Terry's feeding tube one last time, and Terry passed away. This case was a big step for those who wish to die peacefully and not be put on a ventilator and feeding tube for long periods of time following a traumatic event. One of the main reasons why physicians are having a hard time deciding what to do regarding end-of-life care for their patients and other ethical concerns of this nature is because a lot of them do not have proper consulting with a trained ethical consultant about these specified issues. One example involving internists showed that physicians with the least ethics trainings had the least access to and participated in the fewest ethical consultations. While it was shown that many physicians thought consultations yielded information that would be useful in dealing with future ethical dilemmas, many of them thought that these ethical consultants were unqualified to help them or that they would make the situation worse, and most of them hesitated to seek this ethical consultation because they just thought it was too time-consuming and wasn't worth their time to do. Now that you've watched this video and have a better understanding of what doctors have to do when deciding their patients' end-of-life care, do you believe more doctors should be required to see ethical consultants or participate in an online class regarding ethical issues to keep their license to practice? And if a patient does not have family members or a living will, who do you think should decide what to do for their end-of-life care if they cannot communicate the wishes that they would want for themselves?
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our references for some important links to new info.